What's going on, guys? In today's video we're going to be talking about my complete workflow of how I create renders like this. Now, some of you may have seen I've uploaded a alpha art cyberpunk jacket time lapse, and from that I got quite a few comments asking my workflow, how I done it, how do I get into Blender, Substance Paint, and Marvelous Designer, what do I use, etc. So this video we're going to go over the whole process from start to finish. So without further ado, we've got a lot to cover. Let's get started. So the first app I use for this workflow is Daz. So Daz Studio is an incredible program, in fact, but I primarily use it only to create characters and pose them ready for Marvelous Designer and Blender. So once you've downloaded Daz Studio, if you're going to download it, this is the workflow that I like to use. By default, you will have a single plane. I go to the top right corner here and change it to side-by-side view. And this will essentially enable me to see two views of when I have my character in the scene. You can use these tools here to rotate. You can use this to move, and you can use this to zoom. Generally, I just like to use the rotation. Everything else will be the same. I typically have a texture or cartoon shade on one side and NVIDIA Iray on the other side. But for today's video, I'm going to have wireframe on the right side. Okay, so to get your character into Daz, what you need to do is navigate to the left-hand side, make sure you're on Smart Content, find where it says Figures, and bang. You have all of the figures that you have downloaded or that are compatible with your Daz Studio. Now, I have quite a lot of figures because I've purchased some figures, I've imported some figures. However, most of you may only have Genesis 3, Genesis 8, and Genesis 1. So for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to go with what is in the default stock Daz Studio, which is Genesis. So I'm going to start with a Genesis 8 female, so I'm going to import that. Bang. And as you can see, we have our female within Daz Studio. Again, with this transformation, you can see you can rotate, you can see what the character looks like. If you have texture shaded, you can see what the character looks like shaded, but we're not going to do that. The next thing we're going to need to do is we're going to start animating and posing our characters. So in order to do that, you need to activate the timeline. By default, your timeline might be closed. So just expand this window at the bottom here and then go from animate to timeline. If you still cannot see it, don't worry, go to window, panes, scroll down, find timeline and click it. Perfect. Then what we're going to do is we're going to start and add a keyframe right in frame 0. So go down to frame 0 and press this button here to add a keyframe. And this is going to create a keyframe from start. The reason why we're going to do that is because we want our mannequin to be in the A pose. Once our mannequin is in the A pose, it's much easier for us to start designing clothes, whether that's going to be in Blender or for this case, Marvelous Designer and then Blender. So the first thing we're going to do, make sure it's on frame 0, add the keyframe, bang. Then we're going to go and navigate towards poses. Now, realistically, if you really wanted to, you could start posing. You can select onto parts of the character mesh and start posing the character yourself. You can actually click onto the character mesh and start posing and animating the camera yourself. But for the sake of time, we're just going to use the ready-made built-in poses that are in Daz Studio. And I personally like to use the built-in poses because, again, it saves time and they can do a lot better than I can. So I'm going to go to the left-hand side and you'll see it says poses. You'll also see it says filter by context. So what exactly does that mean? Essentially, what the filter by context does is if it's unchecked, you will see all of the poses, regardless whether it's a male or female or whether it's specifically for your characters. To say, for example, there's a Genesis 8 male pose here. If I click onto it, you will see it says the preset you're applying contains values that are outside of your limits. That's because this pose wasn't created for specifically your character. Again, you can try it to see if it works, and you can do that by pressing leave limits on. And in this case, it seems to work fine. But generally speaking, it's not the best thing to do because it doesn't map correctly to your mannequin. So I typically like to leave filter by context, and then we can see all of the poses that are relevant towards our character and it works correctly. So I'm just going to scroll down and find poses that I like. Again, I might have some extra poses here, but I'll just use the default poses just so you can follow along. So for me, I kind of like this walking pose. So instead of clicking onto it straight away, I'm going to move my timeline up to frame 10. And this is so that it creates a new key. So once I double click onto this pose, you can see it's automatically created a keyframe. So if I go to 0, we have the A pose. If I go to frame 10, we have the walking pose that we want. Again, this is absolutely essential because we do not want to start designing clothes on a character like this because it might be quite difficult. Say if you wanted to give her trousers, for example, look at that. Look how difficult it will be, you know, to create something around that. So make sure we have the A pose, frame 0, whatever pose you want, frame 10. If you want to keep adding poses, you can actually just go to like another 10 frames forwards. So for example, frame 20. And then you could add like, I don't know, this pose here if you wanted to. I don't know what this is, but I don't know what this is, but you can add this pose if you want to. So then we have frame 0 is this, frame 10 that, and then from frame 20 is this. The reason why I go in 10 increments is because if you have it too close, for example, if I put a pose here, you can see it starts to move way too quickly. There isn't enough time, and we need time for the clothes to simulate when we're in Marvelous Designer. So I think a good reference is having 10 frame increments in between each of your poses. That's that. We are getting absolutely close. Again, try and think about the right poses that you're going to need for your specific scene. Like if you're in a scene with, I don't know, buildings, whether you're going to be in a scene with a studio, try and find the relevant poses towards that. It's very, very important. For this specific instance, we don't necessarily know what scene we're going to be doing. We're probably going to be in a studio, so it doesn't necessarily matter what poses we pick. Great. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click onto my Genesis 8 female, and I'm just going to delete the eyelashes because we don't need that for now. Perfect. Now we need to start thinking about exporting. So the process of exporting is as follows. Click onto your Genesis 8 female or whatever character you have. Go to File, Export. It's going to bring up a window. And then pick the file format as DAE. This is important. We're going to use the Collada file format, and the reason being is because we have animations and transforms. If we were importing this straight into Blender, I probably would have done an OBJ, but we're going to Marvelous Designer first before we hit Blender. So we're going to use DAE. So click DAE, name it to whatever you want, and click Save. You're going to get a new window that pop up. Make sure you press Show Individual Settings, important, because here you'll see the animation is off by default, which is preposterous if you ask me. But enable animation and tick the next two, which is include transformation, includes morphs. Click accept. It's going to take its sweet time. Might be quick, might be slow, depends on your system. Wait for it to finish and then open up Marvelous Designer. So I'll see you then. Welcome back. We are in Marvelous Designer. As you can see, this is what our UI looks like. We have the 2D view on the right hand side, 3D view on the left hand side. If you have any ready-made garments that you've already created and saved, they'll be here on the left, or even purchased. Your materials will be on the right hand side here, and a property editor is on this side here. But don't worry, I'm going to be going through all of my setup and my process step by step. So first things first, we need to import our character from Daz into Marvelous Designer. Let's get started. So I'm going to go to File, Imports, Open Collada. Navigate to wherever you saved your file and press Open. From here, we're going to leave these settings open. We're going to leave load as avatar, automatically add arrangement points, and we're going to change the scale. Make sure it's auto scale because we want it to be perfect and aligned and easy for us. We don't want any hassle at all. So once you've done that, click OK, and bang, here we are. We have our character, which is what we want. You can right click to rotate. You can use the mouse scroll to zoom in and out. But yeah, let's get started. We're just going to draw a very, very, very simple dress. We're not going to waste time. We're not going to go into details. We're not going to go into the specifics. We're going to pretty much cheat. So the first thing we're going to do is create a polygon. So we're going to use the polygon tool, and I'm just going to draw and I actually think this will be okay. If it's too short, we can fix that in a minute. So I'm going to join these together. Great. I'm then going to select this tool here. Select the last line in the middle, right click, unfold with symmetric editing, and so on. Then we're going to rotate this, select onto our mesh, or close, Control C, and then Control V, Control C, Control V. We're going to copy and paste it. It's going to create a new one. We're going to grab the one we just created, drag it to behind our Daz character, right click, flip the normal, just so we have the correct shading and the correct shadows. Otherwise, it starts to look weird and we don't want that. We're just going to move this forwards. Perfect. Grab the back one and just drag it out so it's not covering. Perfect. Now we're going to start sewing. So the default shortcut is N. So you press N. And on the left hand side here, you're going to see we're going to start to sew our mesh. So this is going to be interesting. So press N and link these two together. So wherever you see a little line, you link them. Ideally, you want to make sure it's opposite, it's parallel to each other. Because if I go down here and I do it this way, you can see it crosses and we don't want that. Because it's going to start to look super disgusting. It's going to flip and we don't want that at all. So make sure it's literally opposite each other. I'm going to sew this bottom one, but I'm not going to sew this top one here. Because I think that's going to look way better. It's going to give us a little fashionista look. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Perfect. And just like that, we have a simple dress. Now, if you want to extend it or reduce the length of it, just click onto this item here, edit the pattern, press this side, press the other sides, and then you can just hold down Control to make sure it snaps, and then you can drag it up or drag it down. Perfect. That looks good. That looks really good, in fact. Next thing we're going to do is rename this material. So we're going to select onto our mesh. Press this button to assign. And then rename it to dress. We can actually check to see if it's correctly assigned. We press onto the material, then go down to color. You can see we can change the color and not update in real time. We can see right now that, yeah, perfect. The dress is as we want. Now, if you really wanted to get crazy, you can add like a jacket and stuff. But for now, we're just going to leave it like this for the sake of time. The next thing we're going to do is animations. So we need to get the animations that we created in Daz Studio into Marvelous Designer. So how do we do that? Well, thankfully, since we exported it as a collada file, if we go to the top right corner here, where it says simulation, we can change the tab to animation. And as you can see, we have a little red line here, and this shows us the animation file is directly embedded within our DAE. So if we press this button here, this will start simulating and recording the animations and the clothes at the same time. It's going to be using the CPU complete simulation. So this might be a little bit taxing on your system, but it will give you the best simulation possible. So we're just going to press the record button and see what happens. And just like that, you can see our character is posed with our outfit. Now here, what you could do is you can scroll to zoom in and you can just move the playhead to the pose that you want. So for me, I like this walking pose. So we're going to leave at the walking pose and we're going to go back from animation to simulation. Perfect. Now we can see we have the mesh in the walking pose. We can press spacebar here to resimulate. So if we wanted to like move some things around, we could. Make sure it's nice and neat. There's no crazy weird folds or anything. And if there is, like you can see here, it's kind of like a little weird fold. We can fix that in Blender by adding some modifiers, but we'll get into that later on in the video. So try and fix it as much as possible before you get there. So for me, that looks okay. Perfect. So the next thing we need to do is retopology. So by default, imagine you have a huge scene and you have lots of different clothes, lots of different clothing. You have a dress, you've got a coat, you've got a jacket, you've got all of these crazy things. It's going to be quite taxing on your system and it's going to have a crazy amount of polygons. So what we need to do is remesh it. By default, Marvelous Designer now has an inbuilt remeshing tool, which is good. So what you need to do is select onto all of your clothes, go to the left hand side, the 3D view, right click, and then type in remeshing. And essentially what this is going to do is going to retopologize our mesh for us and gives it just a little bit of better retopology for us. Once that's done, we are now ready to go to the next step, which is going into Blender. If you wanted to save this, for example, this dress or this whatever style you've created for another project, all you need to do is File, Save As, Garment, and then you'll be able to save it like I've saved some of these previous ones here. Okay, next, exporting. What we need to do to export is select our whole mesh. So we're going to select everything here. We're going to go to File, Export, and we're going to export as OBJ selected. I got quite a few comments asking me, what file do you export to? What do you use? It's not getting into Blender. It's not working. Help me. This is what you need to do. Export OBJ selected. And we're going to do this twice, and I'll show you exactly why. Go to the folder to which you want to export. And we're going to export this twice, once for the clothes and once for the character that I like to call a mannequin. So I'm going to export the clothes first. I'm going to see clothes, DA8, save. The export settings all of a sudden pop up and it's going to ask you this. So you're going to select all patterns. Make sure select all avatars are off. This is important because you want to separate them into two different objects. Next, single object, that's fine. Unwilled, thin. Leave the scale as default, and then we're going to press OK. Bang, we've got one down. We're going to deselect everything, reselect everything, and then do the exact same thing again. File, export, OBJ selected, but this time we're going to type in mannequin or whatever you decide to call your character, because we're going to deselect patterns and we're going to select all avatars. The rest of these settings can be the exact same, but this here is important. Deselect patterns, and make sure you reselect avatars. Click OK. Now we can finally get into Blender. So let's get started. Okay, so here we are in Blender. First and foremost, welcome. If your Blender doesn't look like this is important. Go to the link in my description, download my startup file, and you'll get my startup file with my scene, which looks like this, basically. And it's important because our next step, I'll show you exactly why. But for now, get a startup file. I'll wait. Okay, I waited long enough. Welcome back. First thing we're going to do is delete the default cube. Goodbye. Select it, press X, delete. Next, we're going to start and import our characters. So to do that, we're going to go to File, Import, Wavefront OBJ. Navigate to wherever you've saved your characters. And the first thing I'm going to import is my character. So I'm going to click mannequin. You can see that the scale is huge. Don't worry, it's not actually that big. It's actually true to size to how tall she should be, but we're going to reduce the scale just so it's not as taxing on our system. Once you've imported your character, import your clothes. So File, Import, Wavefront OBJ, import the clothes. And as you can see, we have the clothes on the mesh. Then we're going to select both. Press S to scale, and we're going to scale it down. Just scale it down. Going to make sure she fits within my camera. Now I'm going to enter render view and see what we're working with. Bang. Here she is, wearing the dress. But as you can see, you might notice absolutely straight away. Look at that. She looks like Storm at the moment because her eyes aren't there. So to fix this, go to the shading workspace. Select onto the character, remember not the clothes, the character. And then you need to find the cornea material and select onto it. Then where it says alpha, reduce this to 0, and bang, straight away we can see the natural eyes are back. Again, if you wanted to, you can reduce that eye moisture down a little bit. What else is there? The eye socket, you can reduce the alpha a little bit, not too much. And we have a little bit more natural looking eyes for now. Okay, now that that's fixed, what we need to do is start working on a studio. So what I'm going to do straight away, in fact, is I'm going to change it from the Instagram aspect ratio to a widescreen aspect ratio. So we're going to go to here, I'm going to change the output properties, click this tab here, and you'll see the preset of ultra wide. I'm going to click that. Then I'm going to select the camera and I'm just going to move it back. Perfect. I'm going to change this tab from IG to widescreen. There we go. Now I'm going to enable the studio. So the reason why I asked you to download my startup file is because included in my startup file is a inbuilt studio. So it's just hidden as a collection. So if we select it and we press these two icons here, you can see that we have our studio. By default, it's going to be really bright because it's not meant for this specific scene. So what we're going to do is we're going to delete one of the lights which is closest to our scene, our model. Then we're just going to reduce all of these lights by at least 50% just to see what it looks like. So I'm going to do that now. Again, adjust it to taste and do it to however well you think best suits your scene. So for me, I'm going to reduce this. Going to reduce the background so it's not too bright. And for me, I think that looks okay. I think that starts to look pretty good. Okay, now that we're in Blender, we've set up our studio, we've imported our model and we've imported our clothes. The next step is, okay, great. How do we get this into a software like Substance Painter? So to get this into Substance Painter, what we're going to do is the following. We're going to navigate to the UV editing tab, which is at the top. Select onto our clothes, then hit tab. And you'll see that the UVs are huge. It's not what we want. We want it to fit onto this little grid here. So to do that, go to UV, Smart UV Project, click OK, and look at that. It's automatically unwrapped our UV and it's pretty decent. It's done a pretty good job. So now we need to get our clothes into Substance Painter, and I'm going to show you the export settings for that because a lot of people had problems with that also. So I'm going to go back to widescreen. I'm going to select onto our mesh, our clothes, by the way, our clothes. Click File, Export, FBX. Yes, we're going to export as an FBX. A lot of people had trouble, and I think I know why. I'm going to show you the correct export settings. So select it, Export FBX. Then on the right-hand side, click Selected Objects, and then press Mesh. I think a lot of people forgot to do this and it wasn't selecting the right object to export. So make sure you press Selected Objects. Perfection. Then I'm going to press Export FBX. And now we're going to open Substance Painter. So open Substance Painter and I'll see you there. Okay, welcome back. We're now in Substance Painter and I'm going to show you my general workflow. We're not going to be super detailed. We're just going to go through it really quickly. So we're going to go to File, New. We're going to click this file here and select where we saved our FBX file. Once we've done that, we're going to press OK. And you can see we have our dress or whatever clothes that you've imported, which is perfect. Absolutely perfect. The next thing we need to do is bake the mesh maps, because if we draw or we add materials, nothing's going to happen because we need to bake the mesh maps. So find where it says bake mesh maps. Your Substance Painter might look a little bit different to mine, but find wherever it says bake mesh maps, click onto it, change the output size to something like 2K, and then press bake selected textures and just wait for it to go. Hopefully this shouldn't take too long depending on your system, and just like that, we've got our meshes baked. Now if we wanted to, we could drag a material. So say for example, if I type in, I don't know, fabric rough, I drag this here. So I'm actually going to do two. I'm going to do one which is kind of like a wool material like this one, and I'm going to do another linen. So for this fabric one, I'm just going to change the color. I'm going to select it, go to color. I'm going to change it to white, and I'll tell you why I'm going to do that. In Blender, I want to have the ability to add any color that I want. So if I wanted to make this blue, red, green, I can. So to do that, I'm going to leave it as white for now. And I also want to add a custom logo at the back of this. So to do that, I'm going to import my logo as an alpha channel. Texture. If you want me to go in depth about how to do this, then let me know in the comments below. I'll give you a better tutorial. I want the back to be leather. I want the material to be leather. In fact, let's make it gold, because why not? Gold pure. Great. Now we're going to add a black mask. And this is so that no matter where I paint, it will only affect what I'm coloring. So I'm going to add my logo that I imported. Put it to the back here. Bang. And just like that, we've got a logo right at the back here with a nice little texture. In fact, we can do one really small one at the front here. Ah, that looks kind of weird. Does it need to be bigger? Yeah, that works. So we'll do one there, we'll do one at the back. Perfect. Okay, now that we've done that, what do we need to do? We need to export, that's what. So our process is as followed. We go to File, Export Textures, go down to Output Textures, and we're going to pick the Unreal Engine SSS Packed. And this is what I found to be one of the best ones for Blender. Go back to Settings, change the size of the texture to 4K because we want it to be the highest quality, and then pick the folder of your output directory. Then press Export and just wait for it to export. Now, if you wanted to change, for example, change this mesh. So before I said I had the fabric linen, I can just drag this down. And have the same sort of effect. Then again, you can go back, File, Export Textures. You can do this as many times depending on how many different textures that you have, really. Okay, great. Now we're going to go back into Blender, so I'll see you there. Okay, great. So now we're back in Blender. We're going to add the textures. So go to the shading workspace, click onto the dress, find the dress material, and then if you have Node Wrangler enabled, select onto your shader, then press Ctrl-Shift-T. Then navigate to wherever you saved your materials, select onto all of your textures, and then click Principal Texture Setup. And as you can see, it's automatically going to map the textures for us. Now, if I zoom into our character, you can see straight away, look, our logo is there. If I spin her around, you can see, bang, we've got a logo directly on our character. So from here, how I like to set up my scene is as follows. I would grab the camera, I'd move it in a lot more, like so, move it up. And then what I'd probably do is select onto the mannequin, select onto the clothes, and I'll duplicate it. And I'll drag one to the left and one to the right. Then the one I've duplicated, I will rotate or turn around so you can see a different alternative angle. Then we're going to select the other one, move it towards the middle. Voila, we've got our mesh and our clothes inside of Blender, and it's looking pretty good. Let's get a closer look, shall we? Great. Now, something I spoke about earlier was changing the colors. So if we go back to the shader editor, the way I like to do this is if you select onto your texture, you can create a color ramp node, place it in between your base color and your principal shader, and you can change the first value to any color you want. And as you can see, we are changing the color. This looks kind of cool. Alternatively, if you had already created, say for example, you'd already created a color within Substance Painter, no problem. You can still do the same thing by adding a color ramp, or you can add a hue node, a hue saturation node in between. And then from here, you can just adjust the hue that way. Again, since this is white, there is no hue, so I can't really change any values except for the gold, which is on the back. I can make that a different color. The next thing I personally like to do is you have the option to remove the mannequins completely or your Daz character mesh. So when I remove them, it almost looks like the clothes are floating, which is a cool kind of look. You can rotate it even more. You can get even more duplicates, have them in funny different positions. You can do all kinds of things, which I like. There is one thing, however, that I'd like to show you, and that's using modifiers. So say, for example, you were in Marvelous Designer, and once you're in Marvelous Designer, for whatever reason, your mesh has holes in it. The clothes that you created has a hole somewhere in here, or it's ripped in some sort of way, and you can't seem to fix it by dragging it out. What you could do is add a modifier in Blender. So the two modifiers which I like to use no matter what is as follows. Number one, subdivision surface. And this will smooth out the mesh, will smooth out the clothes and make it look pretty good, make it look smooth, sensational. I don't like to go anything more than 2 or 3 levels. The second thing that I use is typically a solidify. So say for example, like I spoke about earlier, you have a holes in your mesh. All you need to do is add a solidify modifier, increase the thickness a little bit, and it just increases the thickness of your mesh and it deletes any of the holes or any of the little imperfections it may have. And it's as simple as that. You can go through, you can add as many mannequins or as close as you want, get rid of them, change the color of the studio. You don't actually even need to go into Substance Painter. A lot of the changes and the materials you can actually do within Blender with textures from Texture Haven, Polygon, or even Quixel. Anyway guys, if you like this video, please share, subscribe, comment, like. I hope this was useful for you. I hope you learned a few things. If not, I apologize. If you end up using this workflow, then let me know in the comments below. I'd love to see your renders. Tag me on Instagram. If you want me to make an even more detailed tutorial, also let me know. Or if you want me to make a tutorial about just using Blender and Daz Studio to create clothes and no other third-party paid plugins, then let me know also. I'll see you on the next one, guys. Peace.